Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today is a phenomenal woman that I had the pleasure of meeting just last year. We were on a virtual author event, in fact, and so that's how I got acquainted with her. I got a little bit of taste of what she was about, a little bit about her story, and I knew that as we were approaching the new season that I wanted her to be a part of this lineup. I reached out to her, and she graciously accepted the invite to take time out to be with us this evening. This young lady, as I said, is an author. She's a community advocate, podcast host, event planner, clothing line owner, but most importantly, she's a woman of God. And she's taken time out of a very busy schedule to hang out with us, to share a little bit of her journey with the hopes of encouraging and inspiring and uplifting others, especially when it comes to us dealing with our challenges and adversities of life. So it is my privilege, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you our special guest this evening, Miss Aneta Sproles. Aneta, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to be on and just give everybody a chance to learn more about me and who I am.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're going to do just that. But before we jump into our segments, I do want to give you an opportunity to give the audience a little bit of introduction about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do, kind of give them a taste of who is Aneta Sproles.
Okay, well, I am author Aneta Sproles. I am originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am an author and also a community advocate, and I do a different array of things. So I'm so had a jack of all trades.
Awesome, awesome. And to my audience, you're going to find out about all these jacks of all trades that she is, because she does have her hands on a lot of different things, but it's good things. She's trying to make impact on the lives of many, doing everything she can to reach those masses, and I can't say enough to say how proud I am to see the work that she's doing, and I just know God is just going to use her in a mighty way to reach as many as possible and be a blessing. So I'm excited, and I know my audience is too. So let's go ahead and jump into our segments for this evening, Aneta. And I want to kind of start off with the beginnings is what I like to say is, whenever we talk about our journeys, whenever we talk about our story, I always think it's very important that we take a moment to reflect about where it all starts. And so, with that said, if you would, take us back to your childhood and share with us what was it like for you growing up, fond memories that you have about growing up, as well as if there was any particular challenges that came along the way that you'd like to share as well. Just kind of giving us that foundation of where your story begins.
Okay, so I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In the beginning, I did not come from a background of us, having a lot. My family went through a lot of different challenges before my parents actually became successful. And so just navigating that space of living in some of the not best places, but still trying to, strive to be a straight A student. Life kind of hit me with some challenges because it was kind of hard living in a difficult neighborhood and then trying to go to school and walk to school through that and still keep my mind in a positive setting because I knew that I wanted better for my life. And so as time went on and my parents kind of navigated a different space for us and put us into a better environment, things got a lot better. And so I just kept pushing myself for greatness. And so I'm proud of where I came from.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I always love to hear stories of, where, yeah, in the beginning it was a little rough, challenges were there, but, and we may not understand it back then, of course, as children, but you learn as you move along through your journey in life that, those challenges were taking place for a reason. You had to go through that testing. You had to go through those stressors, if you will, because it was an opportunity to build you up, to strengthen you, to position you in such a way that when I think about some of the works that you're doing now, it makes you more relatable. It makes you more approachable, able to connect in ways that you might have not otherwise been able to connect if everything was just laid out perfectly and easily for you. So when God positions us like that, He's not trying to make life miserable for us. He already sees, He already has planned ahead what that vision and that purpose is for our lives. We just have to go through that journey, go through that process, and begin to connect those dots. And then as we get older, it starts to all make sense. We
Yeah.
begin to pull it all together. Okay, that's why I had to go through that. That's why this had to take place. So I'm always loving to hear stories like that. And of course, just a reminder to just anybody that, hey, just because the things start out rough or it might seem like it's bleak or what have you, that doesn't mean that that's the end of your story, that there's so much more to live for, so much more to work for. And you just got to keep on trudging through and keeping a positive mindset, even in spite of what might be going on environmentally or challenging around you. So appreciate you sharing that. So Aneta, as I'm sure again, we go through our childhood, we experience some things might be challenging, some things are, good times or what have you. But, along with getting older comes a series of experiences, a series of storms, if you will. And sometimes those storms are minor in nature. They're just kind of the regular everyday stuff that we deal with. But every now and then, I don't care who you are, what kind of background you come from, or what have you. Every now and then, we get hit with something that's a little bit heavier than the normal type of stuff. Something that when it comes down our street and it's sitting in front of us, we're like, man, how am I going to get through this? This is a little bit heavier, a little bit more weightier than the normal stuff. This is not something I can throw some money at to make it go away. I can pick up the phone and make a call and make it go away. What am I going to do? So, with that said, tell us about a time where you felt like you were in that type of situation where you didn't see a way out. You didn't know what you were going to do. Obviously, you're here today, so I'm trusting that God was able to navigate you through whatever the situation is that you're going to share with us. But maybe back then you weren't quite so sure about that. So if you would kind of walk us through what that situation was like with you, and what was ultimately the turning point where you began to see some light at the end of the tunnel and coming out of that situation.
I would have to say that's when I was in my last marriage. And I ended up thinking that once we got married, that the person was a certain way. And the more that we decided to be together, he became extremely abusive to the point where I was extremely isolated. He tried to take my life over 20 times in 5 years. I didn't think I would ever make it out alive from that. So just to be even sitting here talking to you today, that's also, kind of what pushes me to help others is realizing what it's like when you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel and you don't know if you're going to make it out of something. But I think towards the end, I just remembered that God is always the author and God can change anything around. So I use that to really keep me going to say, I know God's going to get me out of this. And I just kept pushing through and praying, and God got me out of that so I can, continue to make an impact in others' lives today.
Wow, wow. First off, I appreciate your transparency and sharing that, but I do want to build up on that a little bit more. So, you said you had more than 20 instances where you're literally you thought your life was going to be taken in the course of this marriage, and how long did the marriage last?
For 4.5 years.
4.5 years. And so when you, I mean, of course, I don't want to minimize or anything of the like in a situation like this. This is obviously a very serious subject matter. So, when you think about prior to the marriage happening, was there anything that was coming about that was said, actions or behavior patterns that you saw that gave you any kind of inclination that this was something to be concerned about?
I will say, in hindsight, now looking back, there were a lot of things that I overlooked, believing that, well, if you love a person, even if they have challenges going on, or even if there's something wrong from their past, that you can love them through that. I didn't realize the true danger I was putting myself in by not paying attention to those red flags in the beginning.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that because just to the point of what you just said, I mean, there are times when we get into these relationships and like you said, there are some signs, there are some indicators, some warning flags that are present, and we kind of ignore them, thinking that either like I said that we get married and they'll just go away, or that maybe if you're the one that seems to be the more rational person in the relationship, you're thinking, well, uh, as soon as we get together or the longer that they're around me, that I'll be able to change their ways, just being with me, that'll make them different, that whatever it is that's going on. And a lot of those abusive type of situations actually stem from things that have happened earlier on in life, whether it was something personally that happened with that individual or something that they grew up observing. And that in no way is to excuse the behavior, but it does kind of give some perspective of perhaps where that might be coming from. Did you ever get any indication as to the root of where that was even coming from, or was it just something that you just kind of had to experience as it was going along? Did that even ever come up in conversations or anything of that like?
So I had to kind of go in what I would call is learning to investigate things when your intuition is telling you something,
Mm-hmm.
learning to go deeper with that. My intuition kept telling me that something had happened prior to me, something was wrong. So I went and began to find things out. I began to kind of piece together the puzzle of what not to say that it was okay what this person was doing, but to also understand the root of what made them believe that patterns like this was okay, and they saw no problem with it. And so as I got to the root of that and just learning things, that it had a lot to do with them having childhood trauma, issues with their mother, then transpired over into them being in relationships with women, specifically of a certain color. So I was unaware of all this until when I was too deep in, and just learning it, though, it shows you that there truly is always a root to certain things. And once you find them out, it kind of helps you understand things a little different.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so as you're going through these moments, like kind of take us back. So like the first time that it happens, and I don't know exactly what that situation was, but the first time that there's a circumstance, a situation that arises, and the physical abuse takes place, what's going on in your mind? What are you thinking in that moment, and how are you processing this? Are you seeing it as just a oh, he didn't mean it, or are you what was kind of take us through what were you thinking when the very first time that it happened?
So we had only been married at the time for 6 weeks.
Okay.
And he got so irate that he abused me physically in front of his own children, to the point where they were screaming for him to let me go, and like I was bleeding and everything. And it was the first time it happened, and I was like, well, maybe the house is stressing him out. This was before I knew everything else. I was like, well, maybe something is stressing him out. I don't know. Maybe I didn't say the right tone or something. And I just was like, oh my God, but we just got married, so I can't just divorce him. I'm like, well, let me just try to, toughen it out. But for me, that was a very big moment of terror for me, because it's one thing to abuse somebody when nobody's around, but I feel like there's a different dynamic that comes into place when children are there to witness that. That speaks volumes of to how a person is willing to, engage no matter who's around. And so I think that was very scary for me to witness that.
That's an excellent point because I think that that I think that does speak to one's mindset when it's one thing because usually when you think about physical abuse you don't traditionally think about it as something that you would do out in open in front of everybody because you're trying to maintain whatever the persona whatever the perception is that people have of you. If people think of you as being this great wonderful awesome person and all of that and then not knowing that behind the scenes you are abusing your spouse, yeah, that would be a conflict. But then when it gets to the point where something enrages you so much in that spouse, no matter what that situation is, that you don't even care who's around, in particular, actually letting your children see something like this. Yeah, I would definitely agree with you that that's something that is even more glaring to draw some attention to. And I'm just kind of walking through this because again, we're going to have somebody that's listening to this that is in an abusive situation right now, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to help them, through you, help them to figure out, what are the signs, what are those initial indicators? Because you said prior to the marriage, did you ever have any kind of physical altercation prior to marriage?
So prior to the marriage, I think that's what made it so much more scarier,
Mm-hmm.
because to watch a person go from being so nice and charismatic, and they're just trying to convince you they're like this perfect guy you met
Mm-hmm.
and nothing is wrong. And in the moment when you get married and they feel like now you're isolated to just them, and there's this new dynamic where you are attached to them in a different way. Now it's like, well, now the mask can come off, because where are you going to go? And that happens a lot more often than we are aware of, in this world today. Where in the beginning it's never like that, and then it's like, once you get married to them, or they get you off into a certain space where you're just with them, then things start to happen and occur.
Absolutely. So that isolation that you've spoken to, and I want to make sure that I'm clarifying in my understanding of it. So when we talk about that isolation, was this more of one of those situations where I'm with somebody who's it's more of like of a possessiveness, like I don't want you to be anywhere without me, kind of keeping tabs on everything that you say or do, who you talk to, and that kind of thing. Is that what we're speaking of when you talk about that isolation feeling?
Yes. So, my situation was more of being isolated, where a person would break my phone so I couldn't communicate.
Mm-hmm.
They would only want me to be with them, or they would purposely abuse me so I would miss events, or I would miss things I had to do so I couldn't go out into the public and possibly even hint that I was being abused. So, there's different levels of how people choose to isolate their victims. But for me, I think this was one of the most heinous cases that I had to suffer and endure, from this person, unfortunately.
Wow, wow. So in this 4.5 year time span, like you said, while he may have made efforts to try to quote unquote isolate you, whatever, I'm sure that there were moments in time where you were out of this isolation moment and you're out in public, and if he's physically abusing you in the at the level that you are specifying here, I would imagine that there were moments in time where there were visible indicators of abuse. In that scenario, did was there ever any time that people on the outside, whether you intended for them to notice or not, friends, family, or anything like that, that they noticed and began to question you about, is everything okay or anything like that? And if so, what was your response when that would happen?
Well, the first thing was his friends began to notice it, but then they were condoning it, saying, "Well, you need to just change what you're doing," and it wouldn't happen.
Mm,
Once my family began to realize what was going on, they would go to the police and they would encourage me to. But I think it was so hard because it was like, even I felt like the police department were failing me because I would make police reports and he would just go and say, "My wife is just frustrated. She doesn't know, she doesn't mean all this stuff. She's just frustrated and, she's just doing all this stuff to herself. I can't do that. Look at me. I'm a guy with kids. I can't be doing this kind of stuff. I'm a good guy." And so I think to see law enforcement that's supposed to serve and protect me, not protect me to the point where my life was in danger so much, that was really eye opening for me.
wow. So if I'm hearing you right, so that basically you encountered law enforcement officials who maybe visibly see bruises or what have you on your body, and then he goes in to give his side of the story and basically is convincing them that somehow you put all these bruises and such on yourself and that he had nothing to do with that, because and they were pretty much in what you're saying is they were pretty much taking that story and rolling with it and not making any further progress with that.
Yes.
So, oh wow. And then, like you said, with the family, they would often, you said they were oftentimes calling police, on your behalf. But then, but again, that doesn't necessarily work because in your particular circumstances, the police weren't proactive in taking the matter seriously. And I guess since he wasn't feeling any repercussions from anything that when you did go after, pursuing police or what have you, I'm sure that just gave him motivation in his own way to justify continuing the behavior. Did there was there moments where when you did, let's just say, call the police and then it gets blown off by the police and they brush it off or what have you? Did that actually make things worse for you because you told somebody, or was it or did was there ever a calming period in between time where he's saying I'm sorry, it'll never happen again, and then you look up thinking everything is okay and then it's right back to the same old thing? Or was this more of a just a kind of a continuous, just you expected to consider this to be the new norm, if you will, of the marriage? What was that? How would you explain that?
It seems to me that the more he got away with it with law enforcement, it kind of gave him this sense of power that he began to feel, which made it worse. Where he would always taunt me and tell me, like, you called the police all these times. What happened? They came to our house. All you did was irritate me now because they just came and talked to me. But as you see, I'm pretty much in control of this. So it would make him feel like he could do more. He could do more. So then the abuse got worse. And so it just left me feeling like I'm not going to make it out of this because there's nobody to save me. No matter, even though I'm expressing what's happening, I don't have a way out. And so that's kind of what continued to happen over time is that it just made it worse.
Wow. So never really a moment in time where you felt like he was coming to you, even if you didn't believe him or not. He wasn't like ever saying, "Oh, Anita, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that," or anything like that. It was more like the more he got away with it, the more empowered he felt instead.
Yes.
No sense of remorse or anything of that nature.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. And so let's kind of fast forward into this. So this is going on. Weeks, months, now years are passing. The abuse is becoming more and more intense, more and more extreme. Several moments in time, as you shared earlier, to where you literally thought you were not going to come out of this situation alive. It's now at that point, the last abuse moment has taken place, and you said, enough is enough. Walk us through, when was that enough moment? When did that enough moment happen? And now you are at that point where you are finally breaking up out of this thing. with no looking back, no more chances, no more opportunities to potentially take my life. Take us through what were you at? What was that moment like for you? What was that experience like?
So I had divorced him, and we had been separated for a couple months. I had gotten away from him, and he called me and he goes, "Well, I'm not okay. You know what? I've had time to think. I'm so sorry what I did in our marriage. I just want to talk to you. If you can come spend a couple days with me, I just really want to be apologetic and fix my life and get right with God." And I'm like, "Well, this is coming out of nowhere because in years I've never heard him talk like this." So I said, well, I said, if I go back around him and anything else happens, I said, I'm going to fight for justice for him to go to jail. And I said, I will not let up on that. I am not going to go through the same thing again. So we got back together after I divorced him. We were living in the same house. He waited about 6 weeks. The abuse started again. First, it was just the yelling. Then he started physically abusing me to the point where I was now isolated in this space with him again. So I came up with a plan and I said, I am going to go about this different. So I went to news outlets this time. News outlets started contacting law enforcement. We were in a different state this time. So this state dealt with it very different versus the last state that we were in where they just kind of let it just happen. And so I just strategically was like, I will not continue to be a victim of something I don't have to, and this is it. And so I just planned out my escape, and it actually, I was successful at it.
Wow, wow. And again, like I can't emphasize my appreciation for your being transparent. Is I'm just trying to kind of piece this all together. So you actually divorce, it's over. He reaches out again, says, "Hey, this is really the first time that I'm hearing you say that there seems to be some sense of I'm sorry. Let's work this out." You had to literally leave altogether before that even comes up out of his mouth. Let's try to work it out. And then you step back in to give that another opportunity one more time. And then, brief moment of everything being okay, kind of like how you thought it was supposed to be in the beginning. And then, boom, here we go again. First with the verbal and then back on again with the physical, recreating the whole situation again, even though you technically weren't even married at this point. I
Yes.
just got you here again and I'm just doing this all over again. So all the stuff that you told me, was definitely, not the truth at all. And you were not ready to do right. You had not gotten beyond this violent behavior or anything like that. So here you are in this situation now. I've given this second chance, and here I'm right back in again, and I got to get out. You've reached out to all of these outlets and everything. So that what ultimately did you now finally get the police response that you were needing to get, and all the other response to finally physically get you out of this with no possibility of this having to be a reoccurring event for you? Is that an accurate conclusion to that?
Yes. So this time, the outlets listened, the police listened in a different state that we were now living in. They listened and they were like, this is ridiculous. When they started to backtrack the paper trail, they were like, oh my God, you know. And for me, it took a lot of courage to put my story out to like news outlets and to, just let people, and mind you, at the time, because I'm a business owner, a lot of people know me. So then now when you're in a whole new state and people only know you for one thing, but now you have to go and talk to media outlets because now you're being abused, that took a lot of courage for me to be so open and transparent that I was being physically abused again. So I'm just glad that although I continue to advocate that this time he actually did end up being put in jail and the abuse stopped. And, now I'm free from that for good. I'm very thankful for that.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm thankful for you as well. One thing that I'm sure, and you may have encountered this, but I'm sure listeners to this podcast might have questions on is, um, what made you even decide, after having dealt with so much abuse prior in the prior marriage, what made you even decide to offer up this one more opportunity, knowing that what ended up happening could have possibly happened, and it ended up doing, and it did end up happening. What was it that triggered you to say, I want to give him another opportunity to prove himself, to put myself in this situation to see if maybe this time he'll do right.
I think because I'm such a spiritual woman, I have a very deep belief in God, and I always believe, to forgive people and, try to open that space to allow people to change, even if you don't know what it's going to be. And I think I had a sense of, okay, well, let me be forgiving. And now we're not married. I don't think I would hope a person wouldn't create the same patterns again. So I said, well, let me go into this with an open mind, and say, hey, God want me to forgive. Let me create a safe space for us. But I didn't understand that I was the only person wanting to come in and create that safe space. And instead, he was okay with there still being a toxic, abusive space.
Absolutely. So, this is what you offered up to do here, and I'm glad you hit on it. Is a very challenging word for a lot of us is forgiveness. And I can only imagine a woman having been physically abused, how difficult that might be to even utter those words out of your mouth. There's a lot of abused women out here, whether they are listening to this podcast or not, that could never find it in themselves to forgive that. They would consider that to be an unforgivable offense. But I have total respect for the fact that you offered up forgiveness towards this man in spite of um, what he did to you. And I would suspect, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I would suspect that while you might have regretted the decision of giving him another chance, uh, I would suspect that do you or you can clarify for me, do you regret forgiving?
I don't regret forgiving. I do feel I would say I feel a certain type of way because I allowed myself to go back into that space. I don't regret forgiving him because the forgiveness was more for me than him. And it also helped me to heal. But then I also had to realize that going back into the situation, it allowed me to have the permanent closure that I needed
Mhm.
so that there would be no need to ever backtrack again. So, things always happen for a reason. And I believe that's why this happened, when I went back to him.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you clarified that because I think that's a very that is of all that you've told me so far in this story. That to go through an experience like that, it is so powerful and so important that we understand what forgiveness is all about. And like you said, the forgiveness was for you.
Hmm.
It was and it was a necessary catalyst for your healing process to begin. If you don't forgive, you can't begin healing. You still continue to walk around with these open, emotional, mental wounds, if you will, aside from the
Hmm.
physical ones. Um, and not being able to progress on with your life, not being able to perhaps move on to other relationships because there hasn't been that closure, like you said. That forgiveness facilitates that healing, it facilitates that closure. And so I so admire the fact that you said, you know what, yeah, if I had a chance to do it all over again, would I have gone in that situation and subjected myself to more abuse on top of what I've already been experienced? Maybe not. But the fact that you're honoring the fact that even in the most outrageous, crazy of circumstances, God does expect us to forgive, because the reality at the end of the day is that while we might not be prone to do physical abuse or something of that nature, sin is sin. And so there's a wrong that we might do. There's something that we might say that's out of line. There's an action that we might perform to somebody that's inappropriate or what have you. And if we want God to forgive us, then we
Hmm.
have to have a spirit of wanting to forgive other people, even in the most difficult and challenging ways. And again, forgiveness is not something that suggests that you condone the behavior. We're not
Yeah.
saying that the behavior was right. It was dead wrong. And we
Hmm.
can we can speak on that for that could be a whole show on the wrongness
Yeah.
of domestic abuse. But
Yes.
forgiveness, the power in it is so significant, and this is why I'm taking this time to stress on that, because again, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing today had you not forgiven. But you
Yeah.
had to go through that challenge, that storm, and even to that, there are going to be some people who question that might tune into this and be like, well, if God is so loving, if he's so caring, why would he let you be with a man that would beat on you like that or whatever? Well, God didn't promote or support or endorse this man putting this physical abuse against
Hmm.
you. But, again, there are scenarios, and we don't always understand the why to it, but there are scenarios where God will allow a situation to progress, again, preparing us for something down the road. Because if you really think about, God's presence in all of this, if when it's all said and done, the mere fact that you said that you can count on in your mind at least 20 times, and you didn't die from that, that lets me know that God had a plan for you to be around. That it was never
Yes.
intended that even in such a severe and extreme situation, it was never intended to destroy you.
Yes.
There may be a sense of brokenness that had to go on, inside of you and even on the outside, but God was always there all along. He was always making sure that this would never get to the point, to where it would actually take you out, because he had a design purpose in mind for you and for your life. And again, we can always scratch our heads and wonder, and it won't be until the day that we face our maker that we might get some answers to some of these questions, like why some of the storms that we've had to go through, did we have to go through them. But as we shared earlier at the top of the show, about sometimes it's about kind of connecting those dots. And I'm sure even now in the works that you do, you kind of sometimes may reflect on those darker times, but you can kind of find little moments, little gems, if you would, that you could say, okay, while it was trying for me, when I think about the work that I'm doing now and how I'm able to connect, how I'm able to impact, how I'm able to relate, there are elements of the experience that I'm able to now apply to what I do in today's world, in today's time, that is allowing me to change lives, to allow me to pour into, allowing me to uplift, allowing me to encourage. And so, um, while we never wish anything like this on anybody, you have to understand that there's always some lessons in whatever storms and whatever pains and whatever challenges we go
Yeah.
through, no matter how extreme, no matter how exaggerated they may seem to be. So again, I appreciate your not only your transparency, but your resilience and your strength, and your valuing the importance of forgiveness, because that is definitely a big piece of it all. So thank you for that. Um, so Anita, when we talk about, I want to talk a little bit more about that healing process. When you find yourself facing challenging situations, obviously you spoke about one that's very intense, very serious, but as we all know, sometimes they're big and major like that. Sometimes they're the minor day to day type,
Mhm.
annoyances that we have. Everybody faces some level of adversities throughout the course of their lives at various levels of intensity. But what I'm curious to know from you is, when you do find yourself facing challenging times, challenging situations, no matter what the degree of intensity it is, what is it that you like to do that kind of works best for you to kind of be in the right mind and the right spirit to process through whatever that challenging moment is? What works best for you?
I am big on meditation, making sure that my mind is clear even in the most challenging situations. Because people don't understand, a lot of times, if your mind is not clear, you cannot make the appropriate decisions you need to, even in the worst of situations. So I believe in just meditating, processing what's happening, and making sure that you still are able to keep that mindset to make the appropriate decisions needed to get through that situation and navigate properly.
That's good. That's good. And I know definitely second that. You have to have the opportunity to sort of kind of clear your head, clear your mind. It's a thing that I like to refer to as that kind of have that pause, pray, and proceed moment, where you got to have that moment where you just, in that quiet moment where you have a chance to process what just happened, this hit that I just took in the gut.
Yeah.
What is this? And letting out whatever it is that you're feeling. Sometimes the letting out might mean shedding some tears. Sometimes the letting out might mean screaming. Sometimes it may mean, punching a punching bag, whatever that is, to get it out, to, like you said, to kind of clear your mind, to clear it out of your system. And
Mhm.
then now I can go forward. And, for those of us who understand the importance of being in a relationship with God, we know now I can take that thing up in prayer and say, okay, Lord,
Yes.
okay, you done hit me with this. Now, where we going with this? What am I supposed to do? I hear you. I'm listening. I'm waiting for you to show me, to give me some insight as to making some sense out of all of this. But now you're open to receiving that, because beforehand, if you didn't get that chance to let it all out or whatever, you wouldn't be open to receive or hear anything that he has to say to you, to give you that guidance on how to ultimately proceed forward in doing whatever it is that he says that this is what you must now do to get beyond this situation, to overcome this particular moment of adversity or challenge in your life. So I appreciate that approach that you're speaking about. You got to take that moment to let it out. Don't,
Yes.
the key thing is it's okay to have those feelings. We're still human.
Yes.
Express whatever it is you need to express. Do whatever you need to do to get that out of you, but just don't stay stuck there. Don't
Yeah.
stay stuck there, but get it out. Definitely don't be that person who's going to hold it in and because I'm ashamed. I don't want nobody to know. I don't want to. I don't want to look a certain kind of way or whatever. No, because you're holding that in. It's like holding poison inside of you, and you don't
Yes.
get a chance to really process through that if you're holding that in. And if you think somehow that holding poison inside of you is going to somehow make you feel better over time, then you're really kidding yourself. That's not a realistic way to approach it. So definitely appreciate how you're standing on that. So Anita, if you had a chance, I mean, you've talked about a heavy topic today, and unfortunately, it's a common thing still, even in today's times, that goes on. Some people are brave enough, like you, to speak out and break free, and then there's some who may even be listening to this podcast who they're in an abusive situation right now, be it verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically, or a combination of it all. If you had a chance to speak to that woman, or even truth be told, even some men who are in that situation right now, don't know what to do. They know that this is not right, that they know that this is not healthy. They fear for their lives. They fear for their overall well-being, maybe even their children, if there's children involved. What would be your words of encouragement to them? What would you say to them that's in that situation and they're looking for a way out? What do they need to be thinking about? What do they need to be doing? What is that message that you have for them?
I say to love yourself, believe that you have the power to leave, to get out. Look at the brighter side of when you make it to the other side of getting out of that. Love yourself enough to know that no matter who the person is, no matter how much you love them, that that is a very toxic situation and that you can make it out and be okay afterwards. So just keep pushing through, keep praying, keep believing that you deserve better.
That's very sound advice. And one other thing I wanted to add, I remember earlier in the conversation you spoke about when this abuse first started happening. You part of your reason for not leaving wasn't even so much even based upon fear. You were just wanting to. I want the marriage to work. I just need to hang in and stick in there. And while God honors the fact that He wants us even in challenging times to work through our marriages and not be so quick like we are today to just say like we used to say back in the day, I quit you, it's over, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. God also is not suggesting in any way, nor has he specified anywhere in His Word that He wants you to stay in an abusive situation. Even if your mindset is to want to work it out, you can, for purposes of safety sake, remove yourself from the situation, connect with the appropriate interceders, if you will, whether that's a Christian counselor, pastor, whatever, somebody that's neutral, somebody has the expertise and the knowledge to be able to step into situations like this and help both parties to work out. And assuming both parties want to work it out, is there a possibility for reconciliation to kind of get that thing on the right track? Absolutely, there is. But there's also the possibility that you can go through a session like that and it just don't work out and you need to part your ways. Okay, that's fine. But by no means are we saying that while even though you have that desire to work it out, and there's nothing wrong with you having the desire to do so, of course, as long as both parties want to do it, don't subject yourself into that. If you're in danger, you're in danger. And there's no harm, there's no shame in you removing yourself from that situation sooner rather than later. Because while you were very blessed to be able to survive those multiple times where you were facing literal life threatening situations, there's a lot of stories out there where that wasn't so much the case for others who were in similar abusive situations, and unfortunately they're not alive to be in a moment like this to even tell their story because they're in a casket in the ground because they stayed too long
Yeah.
trying to work it out, or like you said, not loving yourself enough to walk away from that situation no matter what you have to do to get up out of that thing, because it God didn't create you to be abused on, to be mistreated, to be mishandled. That's not to say that there won't be people that come in your life that will try to do that. That's a whole agenda of the enemy to bring people who want to discourage you, to keep you down, to make you feel less than. But nevertheless, if you are in actual physical harm and danger, don't hesitate. The first inkling, the first sign that you think it's going that way, and it doesn't even have to be an actual laying of the hands. Sometimes just the verbal can be enough to give you that flag. God will give you red flags to let you know to make a move. We just got to be mindful to pay attention to those things. and respond accordingly, because he doesn't want you to be in an abusive situations. That's not how he created marriage by design, to be something that you should look, be dreading to be a part of. It's supposed to be one of the greatest things that he's ever created as for us, is to be involved in a marriage. So just for
Yeah.
those who are listening, take heed to what I'm saying, and definitely take heed to what Anita has shared from
Hmm.
personal experience firsthand,
Yes.
and being in that situation. So, Anita, it has been an awesome time with you, hearing your story. So much appreciate your transparency and your vulnerability. I mean, this can never be easy to talk about,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, it's definitely an important conversation, and I'm glad you were transparent and willing enough to share, because I've been blessed in hearing what you've had to share. I know my listeners are going to be blessed as well. Hearing this is very important stuff, very valuable stuff, and for all we know, you might have just saved somebody's life tonight in sharing as you have. So we do not take that lightly. But before I do let you go, as is customary here on the Blessings in the Streets podcast, I do want to take an opportunity to celebrate you, to love on you, to acknowledge you. So if you got anything that's exciting going on professionally, personally, or a little bit of both, it doesn't matter. Please tell us what's going on with you right now, what's coming up, how do we support that, be a part of it, connect. Let us know what's rolling out with you in your business ventures, or any works that you got going on, or celebrations.
So I just graduated last week. I am now a trauma and domestic violence counselor. And so now that is a part of an extra service I am offering through my nonprofit, and just in general to help people who have suffered through trauma and domestic violence, because people don't understand that people suffer trauma and domestic violence more often than we talk about. And so they need that safe space to be able to talk and get through things. Also, I have my event in March, Power of Community Summit, March 1st and March 2nd from 12 to 4. We are doing one day in Dallas, the other day in Fort Worth, where we bring community leaders and also residents together to make sure we empower our communities and help others to have a better life.
That is so awesome. And of course, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the hour, you are also an author. Tell them a little bit about your book.
Yes, so I just published my first book nationally. It's called Sleeping with the Monster: My Story of Survival. And it just details the true horror that domestic violence can get to, just the heights of what I experienced in a few years span, how traumatic it was, and how I navigated to get out of that.
Yes, definitely. That's definitely something for anybody interested in learning a little bit more about our story, and getting more in depth details. I would definitely recommend that you check that out. And Anita, if people want to keep up with what's going on with you, works that you're doing, how to get your book, or be a part of any of the events, things of that nature, what's the best way for them to follow you, connect with you? What would that be?
So you can find me on social media as author Aneta Sproles. Also Instagram, Wealthy Anita. My organization is ADE, Recovery and Transitional Living. It's a nonprofit organization that helps people who've been through trauma, domestic violence, and also who experience being homeless. So if you would like to reach out to me, also you can contact me via phone 737-304-2120.
Awesome, awesome. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. She's giving you all her information. She's got a lot of irons in the fire, as I shared with you at the top, as she shared. She's about her business. She's serious about it, and just congratulations to you, of course, on your recent graduation. Again, that's what we talked about earlier. Didn't make sense why you had to go through what you had to go through. Now here you are, degreed up, and offering a service to people who are now going through, trying to bounce back, trying to recover from the very thing, the very dark experience that you had to go through. But you now have the both the sympathy and the empathy and the understanding of what it's going to take to make it through this particular storm. So we never know how God is going to pivot stuff, and it's not always going to be comfortable. But I'm thankful that He allowed you to survive it, but also allowed you to take what was otherwise a very dark moment, probably one of the darkest moments in your life, and now He's using it as an opportunity. He's flipping that thing over for you to be a blessing to people. A service that's definitely needed. You cannot have enough of people like you, pouring out such services and opportunities to individuals. So thankful to thanking God for His covering over you. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for all that you're getting ready to do, and keep lifting you up in prayer for much success and much impact all over the world. And that his favor is always covering you along the way. So thank you again, Aneta, so much for being a part of the podcast. And for my listeners, if you've enjoyed our podcast today, please subscribe, please share, please like, please comment. Because again, this is what the Blessings in the Streets podcast is all about. We want to inspire, we want to uplift, we want to encourage, we want to take stories like you've heard today, being transparent, being vulnerable. It's not about, the shock element or just putting our business out in the street just for the sake of doing it. We wanting to help people. We understand that people are hurting. We understand that the fact that we all go through adversity. We all deal with challenging times of various methods and various ways and various formats. But at the end of the day, those events, while they may be uncomfortable in the moment, they don't have to mean that they in no way mean that that's the ending of your story. God positions these things in such a way. He allows certain things to come our way, not because he wants to destroy us, but he's looking to build us up, strengthen us, position us in such a way to where he can use us to be a blessing for the advancement of his kingdom, to be a blessing to many others that are around us, some people that we know, some people that we have yet to meet. And so I'm here to tell you, and I'm sure Aneta would co-sign on this. If you don't have a relationship with God, today is a mighty fine day to make that happen, because one thing I can tell you for sure, it'll be the best decision that you've ever made. And I'm not saying something that I heard about. I'm telling you something that I know. So with that said, again, thank you for tuning in. And remember, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, you keep fighting that good fight. You keep facing that adversity head on. Have your moment to process. Take that moment to release, and understand, though, that once you do so, turn that thing over to God. Have a conversation with him. Let him be your guide. Let him be your leader on this, because he wants that relationship. He wants that connection. He loves you unconditionally in ways that nobody else can do it for you. And his promises are rock solid. If you give that thing to him, he's going to handle it in the most perfect and absolute ideal way that it's supposed to be handled. If you just simply trust and be obedient to him and just let him lead the way, he will never lead you astray. So I look forward to seeing you next time on the show. Until then, you take care of yourselves and have a great rest of your evening. All right.